now. So, hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, AI, Cyber Risks, and SEC Pressure. Are you ready? I'm thrilled to be joined by two powerhouse leaders in tech and cybersecurity here to discuss all of this. And we're going to get started in just a minute, but first let's introduce you to our guests. First, we have Mohammed Choudhary, Director of Security Engineering for Western Canada at Checkpoint Software Technologies. He's a seasoned expert on the front lines of cybersecurity with decades of experience in the field. Also joining us is David Graham, Harvard's Civic Tech Innovator and the former CIO of Carlsbad, California. He's a leader in IT innovation and digital transformation. Today's conversation is going to cut through the noise and get straight to the critical strategies that tech leaders must adopt to stay resilient in the face of AI-driven threats and increased regulatory pressure. So today in this 30-minute webinar, we're just going to show you what we're going to talk about real quick, how to embed resilience into enterprise architecture, communicating cyber risk at the board level, turning security resilience into a competitive edge, and how innovation and security can and must go hand in hand. A couple of housekeeping items first before we get started. Please place your questions in the chat. We'd love to get to those. You can put them in there anonymously or leave your name, and we'll get to those as they come in. Welcome to our guest panelists. Thank you for joining us, David and Mohammed. So good to have you guys here.
Pleasure.
Yeah,
Great to be
thank you
here,
so
Tracy.
much. Mohammed, let's get started with you first. From your experience, how prepared do you think companies are to meet the new standards of transparency, the SEC and all of that, with the AI and cyber risk? And what's the most common blind spot you see?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Resilience is one of my favorite topics whenever I talk to clients, especially CEOs and CIOs and CISOs. Every time you talk about resilience, Tracy, resilience, it starts with visibility, right? You cannot protect what you cannot see. So it's visibility across cloud, on-prem, endpoints, and identities. Right, it's some of the top vectors that we see being a cybersecurity vendor in the industry for a prolonged dwell time is unmanaged assets, shadow IT or orphan identities. So when you talk to these clients, when you talk about resilience, it's boardroom and the CIOs and executives, they want assurances, right? And
Yes.
resilience start by eliminating blind spots within your environment, right? You have to know what each and everything is connecting to, and you are connected to within your environment. So yeah.
Yeah.
To see
Okay.
what they think about it. Yeah.
David, what do you think about that? I mean, what some of the things Mohammed mentioned are?
Well, so I think this really ties into a lot of the new rules that the SEC has put out there regarding, 4-day incident disclosure, making sure you have these annual cyber audits. But when you're thinking about cybersecurity, you can't wait for the regulators to tell you what to do or how to do it right. It really is about proactivity. And so when Mohammed is talking about transparency, this is really key that this is something that from the boardroom all the way down to frontline staff is a culture and a belief that everyone has a role in cybersecurity. For too long, we have seen that it has been relegated to the CISO or to the IT department, the grumbling about the annual cybersecurity training and why am I doing the same thing over and over and over. But when you look at all the technology and all that we're doing to try to ensure that we are as cyber resilient and also cyber secure as possible, we recognize that people are really the problem. The number one vector for any sort of incident is you clicking on a link. And that could be the CEO, that could be even your IT staff, right? I mean, the sophistication of what is happening with these attacks is so significant these days that you really need to have a belief that security is everybody's challenge. I mean, just think about physical security. We don't complain about having to, badge in or go through a magnometer because we know that those things are making us safe. The exact same approaches to physical security that we've come to experience and understand because of threats that have occurred over many, many years need to be the same way we think about our cybersecurity profile and the way that we individually and our organizations believe in how to be cyber secure.
Yeah, it's so important. And I mean, a lot of these disclosure rules are shaking up boardrooms, as you mentioned. I mean, that definitely. How should tech leaders be rethinking risk communication, David, or Mohammed, or both?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to risk communication, this is something that I think we have, over many years, those of us that enjoy technology and the technologists, and we're seeing it right now with artificial intelligence and Gen AI, speaking too much of the technical language and not in the
Mm-hmm.
human impact language. And I think that
Mm-hmm.
really is where we're transforming the idea of cybersecurity and cyber risk into what does this mean materially for your organization? What does it
Yeah.
actually mean if, you have a denial of service attack that ends up taking you offline for X period of time? Sure, there's the dollars and cents, but there's also the services that people come to rely upon. And so when we begin to change and move to a human-centered approach, which we teach at the Technology and Entrepreneurship Center at Harvard, a human-centered approach to translating what technological language and technological cyber risk means to the average human being, it really changes this whole conversation and gets people to believe this is something that matters, not just an existential threat, but a direct impact on people's lives.
True. And speak our language. I mean, that I think that's so important. Mohammed,
Yeah.
AI is empowering attackers and defenders alike. I mean, it's from both sides, the defenders, and you guys are the defenders, Checkpoint Software, and the attackers. Share how AI is being used to escalate threats and how organizations can stay one step ahead. Because I know that there definitely threats have escalated.
Absolutely. And we talked about it. We actually touched on it a little bit in our last podcast as well, Tracy.
Yeah.
I'll answer this question in two parts, right? Because there's two parts of the question. One is how AI is being used to accelerate threats, and how it is being used to defend, right? So first, let's talk about how AI is being used to accelerate threats, right? AI,
Mhm.
cybersecurity, is basically, like you said, it's transforming battlefields on both sides, right? Enabling more intelligent defense on one side and accelerating threats, right? So some of the examples of AI-based attacks, as we talked about on the podcast, was, first is the automated social engineering, right? So AI is being used to create highly convincing emails, voice clones, deep fakes.
Yeah.
It really increases the rate of BEC, the business email compromise. Then AI is also being used to create faster exploits discoveries, right? So the AI tools are
Hmm.
constantly analyzing code for faster vulnerability identification. Another example that I would think of, and we see in real world, is the adaptive malware. And this is really cool, right? This
Hmm.
is, a malware entering into your environment, and then, it's changing its behavior, altering its behavior in real time, to evade the traditional signature-based, detection. So, where you have the traditional IPSs and IDSs that are based on, just signature that of your firewall downloads from the web. You're still a step behind with this new era of AI. Checkpoint
Hmm.
recently acquired a company called Veriti. I might be butchering the name, but it's basically, that's what it does. It's the automated remediation and threat intelligence that is constantly looking at the patterns of the traffic and the packets that
Hmm.
are coming in the environment, and provide more of a threat prevention, if you may, or threat remediation within your environment. So that was a really
Yeah.
cool thing. So, second part of the conversation or the question was like how AI is being used to, detect or
Yes.
create for defense, pretty much, right? Um, you
Yes.
know, as AI is being used for exploit discovery, you use it for AI threat prevention and detection. As I mentioned, there are tools that are out there that are the companies that exist that will allow you to use AI for behavioral analytics, right? So you use AI for anomaly detection, um, you know, instead of relying on signature alone.
Hmm.
Another thing would be, as David mentioned in his previous comment, is the employee training and simulations, right? You use AI to create sort of realistic phishing campaigns, realistic phishing
Yeah.
or team scenarios. That not only build resilience within your team, as the topic of today's conversation is. It also allows your team to recognize threats faster, right, and be more proactive, be more agile, if you may, within your defense.
And it's so important. And David, in your role advising on innovation and threats, how do you see the balance between enabling innovation and managing increased cyber risk that comes with AI adoption?
When you're thinking about innovation, you hear terms like fail fast, fail forward, and this concept that failure is something that is a part of being able to take risk and do big, bold things is married up with innovation. What I have found is as we're dealing in spaces that particularly relate to increased cyber risk and challenges for an organization, and especially when we're talking about technology, that while we understand to some extent as we relate to generative AI in general, but at the same time, don't fully understand what's in the black box itself,
Yeah.
one of the most useful tools is building the sandbox for innovation. And so you can have environments in which they're safe, they're secure, they are places where you can innovate without having to
Hmm.
worry as
And
much
test.
about the cyber risk, right? And
Hmm.
so prototyping is key there, iteration is key
Hmm.
there, the ability for people to test and try and do is so important. But then before it goes live or before you really start
Yeah.
to tamper with your architecture and your services and what you're doing, you're making sure that you go through those stages of security. And so this is the big balance that you have to deal with in the innovation space, which is we want to be competitive, we want to move fast, we want to get things
Yeah.
done.
Yeah.
At the same time, the risk to your organization, the risk to your customers, the risk to your systems are
Yeah.
such that you have to balance that with security. And so, how do we really do that? Well, it's all about practicing good cyber hygiene. We know the things that are necessary in your overall cyber infrastructure. And so you don't compromise those things just to try to get a little bit of an edge. It's like saying, when
Yeah.
it comes to trying to have the fastest car possible, how many more laps are you going to go in that Formula One when you know your tires might blow out as opposed to a pit stop? And that's, I
Yeah.
think, where cybersecurity professionals are so key to what we're doing. They're helping us understand when to tap the brakes. They're also helping us to understand how do we mitigate the risks that are on the track. And ultimately, what is the goal? Is it the goal to win every single lap, every single time? Or is the goal to win the overall race? And in the race to compete and to be a competitive organization, that longer term perspective that doesn't sacrifice security, but focuses
Hmm.
on both innovating in a way that is safe, has some level of risk, but ultimately is something that is durable, is crucial. And I think this is where the concept of resilience comes in. It's
Yeah.
not about when something is going to happen or when a system is going to fail or when attack is going to get through. It's what layers do you have? How quickly can you detect it? How quickly can you respond? And how quickly can you bounce back? If you think you are building an unbreakable system, you've already had a broken strategy. And so it's
Yeah.
about the bounce back, not being
Exactly.
unbreakable.
Mohammed, would you say winning the race is important, like David said, not the lap?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, absolutely. And I also agree with David on the taking the risk-based approach, right?
Yeah.
As a CISO, this is constantly what we hear from executives when we talk to them, like, because CISOs, they care about resilience in a different way than than IT does, right? They don't care
Yes,
about
they do.
what products do we use, right? They care about the business continuity. They care about
Hmm.
how do we keep the lights on? How do we keep the business keep running, right? And
Hmm.
taking the risk-based approach is absolutely crucial when you think from a top-down perspective.
Absolutely. Well, you guys, we did a poll last week on LinkedIn, and I want to show you guys the results and get your panelists' reaction because it was kind of interesting. And what we asked people was, what is your organization's biggest barrier to building a future-ready strategy? And so I want to kind of show you the results. So lack of executive and team alignment, 38%, limited budget, unclear ROI, 19, legacy system and tech debt, 19%, and skill gap in cybersecurity and AI resources, 24%. I just want to get your reaction, both of you, to this. Does this surprise you at all? I would have thought maybe skill gap or legacy system, but lack of executive and team alignment, which is exactly what this webinar is about.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I would even add like lack of executive and team engagement as well, right? A lot of times, organization work in a very siloed fashion where you have the IT being siloed, or I wouldn't say within the IT, where you have your developers being siloed from the cybersecurity, or if you are building a product or a software, right? So all these in departments within an organization, they need to communicate with each other if you are bringing a product to a market where to build resilience into a product, it has to go through different phases, and cybersecurity needs to tap into each and every one of that to make sure that we're not leaving any backdoors or loopholes or whatever have you for AI based systems now to to look at and find vulnerabilities within it, right? Long gone are the days when you had humans scrolling through thousands and thousands
Yeah,
of lines of codes. Now you have AI for that, right? So
exactly.
that's what I think.
You
Yeah.
got to stay a step ahead. You got to stay a step ahead. David, any reaction from your side?
Yeah, I think about this in an analogous of what are the priorities of the boardroom and of the executives and of the leaders of a corporation, of the stockholders, right? Of the shareholders. What are their priorities? And their priorities are not to prioritize security. They see that as another line item, as another part of the overall organization. And I think this is where we're beginning to see more and more of this take control and take hold. And it's so fascinating that with all of the money and support going towards the technology solutions, we recognize that having this as fundamental, not a bolt-on, but the backbone of an organization, is what we're going to see on a go-forward basis being the fundamental way that CEOs and boardrooms should be treating this entire situation. And it all comes down to trust, right? At one level, we think of cybersecurity as trust. Who do we trust? What level of access? Who do we let in? Who do we not let in? And how are we wary about that? But I think about it another level deeper, which is how do we create trust in our organizations to be able to explicate and surface those threats and challenges, those weaknesses? How do we treat those who come forward, even like from a whistleblower perspective, where there are things that are occurring in the organization that could lead to really deleterious consequences if they were to come forward and come out? But that early warning system is not a technology thing. The human firewall is just as important as what we build in with the technology. And I think about that Theranos debacle, sort of the emperor has no clothes. Here's this too good to be true blood test that you can do. I mean, what ended up happening there?
Yeah.
You had people buying in and believing into a myth. And if you're buying in and believing that security is something that is going to be, you're invincible, you've already created a situation and a culture and the vectors in which you will fail. But if you can create trust, if you can get people to understand that they are part of the broader system, if you can help understand that the illusion of security is worse than having no security at all, then you're
Yeah.
moving into a place and a space where you can address challenges, be honest and open about it. And this is partially why the regulatory frameworks exist, because for too long, those things have kind of been swept under the rug. The next level, because technology and AI is outstripping our ability just to meet with what the regulators are saying, is that we have to take that proactive approach to go the step further, because the impacts to people, to our organization, to the shareholders, to the services we're delivering are such that this has got to be not just a line item that you say we need to put something towards to cover our butts, but a belief
Yeah.
system that security is crucial to the overall health and security and ultimate success of your organization.
So true. And I hope, I hope that we're all hearing that, because that is so important. We want to remind people, if you guys want to have any questions, please put them in the chat and we'll definitely get to those as they come in. And Mohammed, I just want to go back to you for a second. And David's touched on so many things. So have you, how can companies turn security resilience into a competitive differentiator instead of just that compliance checkbox,
Yeah, yeah, excellent question, Tracy. In 2025, cybersecurity is not just a defense strategy, right? It is a business enabler. So the organizations which embed cyber resilience into their DNA are the ones that will bounce back faster, that will retain customer trust, and really outpace the competition, right?
Mm,
And to do that, I think the tone for cybersecurity has to be set from the top, right? Executives must champion cyber resilience as a strategic initiative, as David mentioned, right?
mhm.
It is not just an IT checkbox.
Yeah,
From
for sure.
being in the industry for over 15 years, I can tell you that, if resilience is owned by IT, it will fail. It
I'm sure people don't want to hear that, but it's kind of true.
It
Yeah,
is kind of true,
exactly.
right? We're getting to
Mm,
that area, but when it is owned by leadership executives,
yeah,
right, it really becomes a true competitive edge, right? Because
yeah.
now you have executives who are actually championing and listening to the concerns of cybersecurity. We don't want people just thinking about, oh, we can just block this particular proxy or this IP address. You have
Hmm.
to take cybersecurity and a risk-based approach into the whole overall business, right? Because
Yeah,
each and every part of your organization, you have to think of the assets, right? Human beings are the biggest assets in any organization, right? And they are the most vulnerable as well. They're the most
yes,
being
we
attacked,
are.
right?
We
All the
click,
emails
we
go to
click,
them.
and we do things that are bad, bad, bad. And even though we're
Absolutely.
told not to, we do it. We do it inadvertently. You don't even think about it sometimes.
Yeah,
So we
exactly.
do have a
So you need
question, guys.
guardrails.
Oh, you definitely do. Definitely do. We do have a question. Feel free, both of you, to answer it, one or the other. How can we identify and mitigate cyber risks, especially those targeting our third-party vendors and remote workforce?
It's so funny that you said that because it was one of the things I was going to bring up as we're kind of wrapping up is we're consistently talking about the organization, which is something you have control of. But we're finding more and more that as that health improves, the supply chain, your vendors, the other connections, your contractors that get, credentials, et cetera, those are areas of threat that are more
Yeah.
crucial than ever before because you may have a belief in all of this, and we might believe in the idea of zero trust architecture, and we might believe in multi-factor authentication. But if you can't validate and verify that that is what the rest of those that interact with your organization are doing, then you're really in a challenging place where you have opened up by trusting those folks to be doing what is necessary to be a new vector that is semi-trusted that could be a really important area for you to need to harden. And I think this is where the power of the contract, bringing them
Yeah.
into and thinking about security as an ecosystem approach, not just your particular system, but the broader ecosystem approach, and
True.
having it not just, endpoint detection for what you're doing, but how do you bring in those vendors and contractors into a broader cybersecurity ecosystem in
Yeah.
order to ensure not just the health of that your organization, but thinking about when that, vendor or supplier or contractor goes down, how does that impact your operations? And sure, that might be
So
a small
true.
percentage, but that could be
And
really impactful. And
makes me
so
think of
building
CrowdStrike, the
incentives,
CrowdStrike.
right? Yeah.
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 Yeah,
Yeah.
Building in incentives
historically.
for that is crucial.
Yeah. Exactly. Mohammed, real quick, I know we're running out of time. What's one question every CEO should ask their CISO right
Yep.
now?
CEOs Yeah, absolutely. So CEOs should, they should focus on aligning security with business risk and resilience, as we talked about. One question that if I were a CEO and I would ask is that how quickly can we detect and contain a breach, right?
Mhm.
And what was the last time we tested that? This
Gotcha.
question that encompasses your RTO, your mean time to recovery, MTTR, and RPOs, right? These three
Yeah.
things are most is very, very crucial. I wouldn't say most, but very crucial to any organization, right? Keeping, like I said, keeping the lights up and running, keeping the business running. It also cuts through the vague assurances, on and and give you a concrete discussion on detection capabilities, on prevention capabilities, response capabilities. Like how would you really respond to an attack that is currently taking place, and a real world validation of how secure are you, right? And
Yeah.
doing some attack simulations and these kind of practices. So again, like this question, detecting the breach, preventing it, and what was the last time we tested it?
Yeah. And we have another question. I think we have a few more minutes. I'm looking at the clock over there. David or Mohammed, feel free to answer it. What is today's biggest blind spot in cybersecurity that could lead to a major incident?
Well, I mean, I think this comes down to organizations actually believing that they are getting closer and closer to being unhackable. If it's unhackable, it's probably imaginary. And we are having people that are trumpeting these ideas of how resilient they are. And all that is doing is putting a bigger and bigger target on your back. And
Yeah.
this is a place where being the boldest and biggest and loudest about how secure you are is the quickest way to get yourself invited to a party you do not want to go to. So
Yeah.
when we're
Good
thinking
point.
about this, and the amount of money and time and investment, the time for big investments in cybersecurity for your organization was 5 years ago. It was 10 years
Yeah.
ago. So don't plan on trying to play catch up. Focus on resilience, continue to invest and grow that and
Mhm.
recognize, just like Muhammad was saying, and I think about again the Theranos, if you're not asking the hard questions, then get ready for big surprises. And these are not
Yeah.
ones you want for your birthday.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't want to go to
Yeah.
that party I'm not invited to. Anything to add to that, Mohammed? Anything to add, Mohammed?
Honestly, I agree with David. He
Yeah.
covered it pretty much everything. And also, I would add is, visibility, right? Some of the blind spot is not having a proper visibility in your environment, right? It's just like I said, you can't protect what you cannot see.
Yeah.
So, knowing, and also, I love that David mentioned about, having looking at the vendors that you're working with, right? The documentation, the approaches that they're taking, the standards they abide by, right? How secure is the vendor that you're working with, like you mentioned, CrowdStrike or SolarWinds or what have you.
Yeah.
So, everything plays into it, right? It's
Yeah.
and it seems like it's quite a lot that you have to do, and it's really not,
It
right?
does.
Because when it is championed, resilience is championed by executives, they understand these kind of things. As
Excellent.
IT, we only know zeros and ones, right? I mean, I won't say all of them. I don't want to offend a lot of people today,
Exactly.
but I think I've done my quota for offending so many people. But I
For
would say,
sure.
it's we engineers, we don't really care, or not care enough about um, business strategies, business
Yeah.
enabler part, right? But this when it is championed by the CEOs and CISOs and executives, it opens up a door. It opens up the collaboration within the team. And now you have your teams talking, and we have one goal to make sure that our organization or product that we're bringing to the market is pretty secure. I'll leave it at
So
that.
true. Yeah, we could talk about it all day. And thank you so much, David
Yeah.
and Mohammed, for your time and insights. It's been just great, very interesting. As we heard today, cybersecurity is no longer just an IT issue, it's a board level priority and a foundation for growth. So we just want to thank you all for joining us as well. We want to put some contact information up here. If you have any questions for our panelists, you can definitely reach out to them. You can see their information there on the screen. reach out to both David and Mohammed. We'll leave it up there for a second. They would be happy to answer any additional questions, or if you'd like to contact them, should you need anything. And you can also go to our website, www.vlinkinfo.com, if you should need any help with IT, cybersecurity consulting services, or staffing. And, if there's one thing I hope everybody takes away, it's definitely that the cost of inaction is rising fast. We want to lead with resilience and readiness. And so you guys have offered so many great suggestions, and we definitely appreciate you being here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity, Tracy.
Yeah.